Welcome back to The Rebel's Edge. Pete Nigerian, my brother, and I will be breaking down for you the Trump tariffs and what kind of effect they had in the pre-market versus what they're doing to the market right now. We've got that, sports, and fantastic futures right after this. Bang! Pete, do you think I'd look younger without my mustache and beard?
I'm not sure that's a great representation of what you'd look like right now. That's a little maybe, I don't know. Mine's all gray over here too. Who knows?
I don't know. Every once in a while, I just think about, well, let me see.
I got something for you. This last weekend, I went to the rodeo, and let me tell you something. If you love America, go to a rodeo, because I'll tell you what, they are all in, and they had a prayer, they had everything. I mean, this whole thing was unbelievable, and what those guys can do on top of these bulls and these other things is pretty damn impressive. I'll tell you that right now, unbelievable.
Pete, years ago, CNBC, because the rodeo does come to Madison Square Garden, I actually had to go out and hang with the bulls for a while. And it was really stupid. They had me interview the bulls and things. So what do you think about? He's like, I hope I'm not a steak.
Ain't that the truth?
Then they made me ride one of those stupid, mechanical bulls.
Yeah, those are great.
I just didn't want to get thrown off the thing. I said, look, I know you want to make it look good for the crowd and all this stuff, but I don't want to dislocate my shoulder, okay?
Yeah,
because I know you could throw me, for women and girls, they tend to do a slightly different ride for them than they do for guys. I think most of you listening know what I'm talking about.
Reminds me of the John Travolta movie, actually.
It might be. Pack your stuff, sissy. All right. Well, this is the Rebel's Edge, folks. Already taken up too much of your time without giving you trades or our insights into some trades. We're going to dive right in to the macro minute. And of course, it's going to be the 25% levy, known as a tariff, on the Mexican and Canadian goods, as well as a 10% tariff on Chinese goods. Well, turns out that it only took about an hour into trading today, Pete, before the Mexican president called up Mr. Trump and said, okay, I'm sending 10,000 troops to the border. And Trump said, I'll give you a stay of 1 month.
It just shows you it can work, right? I mean, doesn't that show everybody that sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes, things can happen. And when they do, it turns out pretty damn good. We were down 600 points on the Dow, 400 points on the NASDAQ, and we reversed those pretty damn fast. Now, we're only a couple hours into the day. We'll see how things go. But that pause, John, I think spoke volumes for everything about what's going on when we talk about these tariffs. Canada's got their own issues, of course, and you brought up China. But I really thought that this was an amazing push, especially when they hit that pause button, man, about an hour into the day. It was just amazing to watch how fast those markets were able to move, and the volatility index, and just about everything else you could think of.
Yep. And one thing, Pete, that we probably need to emphasize more, and we can do it here on Fantastic Futures, because I know you have unusual activity in the VIX, and very few things move as fast as the VIX, folks, up or down. So in other words, if you're betting on a big upward surge, you generally need to hit that bid pretty fast when it pops, because they don't last. There are exceptions. COVID was a little bit of an exception, but I'm not saying it was over 30 or 50 or 60 for more than just a flash when it made those moves, Pete. And then it comes down so fast that you're selling through bids. So I'd say make sure you're aware on the future side, folks, of how fast the VIX moves. But I'll let you take that, Pete.
Well, it is amazing, John, that volatility index. We finished on Friday in the 16s. We get today, and obviously with those moves that we were seeing, we popped all the way through 20. We're above 20. And then the 1 month change really just changed just about everything because that volatility index started to fall. And we're sitting now at about 1850. So significantly moving around right now. That certainly is something that stands out for us. We've seen some of that call buying, John, and some of it, most of it oftentimes is in spreads. But every once in a while, you see something that's just a straight out trade. And that's a great example of what you're looking at right there, right at the end of January. Here we are in February. Take a look at that. And by the way, that 153,000 seems to be a number that is very, very clingy for whoever is making these moves that we oftentimes think it's 50 cent. I'll tell you, it has been amazing, John, and you've got to be quick because to your point, when they move, when the volatilities move, that's a different move than a stock. It is nothing like a stock at all. And it's really has a difficult time holding on very long to some of those higher VIX. When you're talking about 25s, 30s, 60s, all of that, people think, oh my goodness, this is going to be here for a while. I'll hold on to this trade and see. No, sometimes you've just got to make that move because volatility doesn't stay up there that long. If you consider the fact that you expect that the S&P is going to move 2, 3, 4% every single day, that's probably not going to happen for very long. So just always remember that.
Yeah, I would not want to bet on that side, Pete. It's going to be fast, folks, almost always. And it's not an asset. It's a derivative of a derivative.
Right.
So, there's no reason it should stay high or stay too low for too long, except that, people pressure it with their buying or their selling. All right, Pete, let's dive into automakers because this would have been one of the largest classes that would be impacted. Sure, you've got liquor and so forth. And I'm sure all you Labatt's drinkers are probably all worried. And some of you Corona and Modelo drinkers were probably worried as well. But automakers are where the real rubber hits the road, and the pun is intended. So Ford traded all the way down in the pre-market, Pete, to 9. And we had unusual activity in it, folks. Take a look at this. We had some put buying in General Motors, but we definitely had put buying in Ford on Thursday last week with that at 1027, as you see there. Somebody wanted some protection, bought 50,000 of those this week expiring 10 puts. Well, those puts went fairly deep in the money, and they're still in the money now, but Ford isn't down nearly as hard, Pete.
No, it's interesting, though, John. I think you said the right thing, protection. I don't know that they necessarily were, the expectation was that they were going to get slammed. Maybe it was, but I think that the reality is, hey, if you're looking to protect a portfolio, for instance, in this case, maybe it's the stock in Ford or GM or whatever, what an inexpensive way to get some insurance policy to the downside right there. On the other hand, if it truly was just a shot where they were saying, look, I think these are the names, like you said, John, that are going to get the most disruption, the supply chain issues and everything else, then that all makes some sense as well. So either way, it was a trade that worked, and it worked pretty damn fast. When you look at those times, you're looking at what, January 30th or something like that for Ford, and then all of a sudden you look and you say, wow, that was just last Thursday or whatever. I mean, it's absolutely amazing how quick these things can move, both to the downside and that reversal to the upside that we were seeing once we saw that pause, John, with Mexico. Things changed in a hurry, right?
Oh, yeah. They changed in a big hurry, Pete. And again, if you're trading on these tariffs, folks, I would encourage you to be quick on the tariffs, just like we just said about the VIX, because all of a sudden Trudeau could come with his tail between his legs like the Mexican president just did. And then what's going to happen to the tariffs between the U.S. and Canada? I'm just offering it out there. You got to be quick if you're trading stuff based on the tariffs. If you're investing otherwise, I don't think you need to pay attention to the short-term stuff. All right, TGI, Pete. This is the Triumph Group. These guys are big in the aerospace side of the markets, and the stock is a big. Apparently, they're going to be taken private by Berkshire Partners and Warburg Pincus. And what a move out of the stock. It's holding on to that 30+% move, Pete, which, especially on a day that started out so strong to the downside, this is an impressive move.
Yeah, you can see it right there. I mean, I think the chart speaks for itself. And obviously, they were putting themselves into a position, John, to be able to have somebody maybe take a look at what they're doing and maybe even get what exactly they did get, which is, hey, we're going to do a deal. How about a $3 billion deal? We'll put this thing out there for you. I mean, that's an incredible, great seeing of the future that we had from Triumph itself, the inner circle there that actually did all of the work to do things that they probably didn't necessarily want to do, but they did because it would make them more attractive. It certainly did. And now you've got 52-week highs today that we are seeing because of the fact that they're going in at that $26 a share. This is a really impressive one. And John, there were some shorts in there that probably shouldn't have been. They're not feeling too comfortable today because there was like 7 or 8% short interest in this name, probably thinking that this thing was going to hold down there right in the 18s or somewhere below that. Well, that isn't the case, as this stock is going to get taken out for 26. And let me tell you, it's bumping right up against that 26 level, which it doesn't have to, but they are pretty much today.
Yeah, apparently people aren't as concerned, Pete, about a competing bid coming in, but nonetheless, could they have to sweeten the deal even a little bit more if it pops up right up against the buyout price so many months ahead of any kind of closing? My guess is there could be some more negotiation. All right, let's talk about CBOE Global Markets, Pete. As you guys know, sometimes I'm able to shoot from the floor there. They're very nice and accommodating. They are one of the biggest exchanges in the world. I remember back when the NYSE was everything, Pete. But now these guys have so many exchanges in virtually, they can easily run a 24-hour clock because they've got exposure in 24 hours around the world, all these different time zones. So that's the big announcement today, Pete. They say, we're getting ready for a 24-hour trading day. We know the New York has said we're ready for a 22-hour trading day. CBOE says 24, hold my beer. And that's going to be pretty cool. It won't be the weekends, folks. It's not 24/7, but it will be 24 hours a day. Can you imagine, Pete?
Boy, that's crazy. And they're trying to get the rest of the world. I mean, from the name itself, it speaks volumes, right? CBOE Global Markets. I mean, that's what we're looking at here. And these guys, it'll be interesting, John, because it's so different from what you and I were used to. There was that closing bell and everything else, right? At the end of the day, and you could kind of take a breather. There isn't a breather anymore. And the folks around the world who are going to be trading when you and I are probably sleeping could make that pretty interesting as well. I mean, I'm not even sure that I like that in the positive way. That might be a bit of a pain for us, but they'll be on top of all the news stories, everything else. As you said, the NYSE going to 22 hours. There's just a lot of things about this that are pretty interesting, John. And when I looked at the CBOE just for fun, I wanted to see it as a stock or as it is looking as far as the company itself. Free cash flow at the CBOE, John, is only $750 million. I mean, these numbers are absolutely outrageous. It's a 22 PE. I'd say that's pretty reasonable in today's markets or whatever. So, yeah, when you look at CBOE and the global markets and the potential that they could have, and we talk about volumes all the time, well, I'm going to say this. Volumes are going to look even bigger and bigger and bigger would be my guess as we get into the future.
Yeah, it will be a brave new world, and we can't wait. All right, Pete, one more. Let's talk about a stock that's up some, 80% today. These guys, GH Research, the stock was up almost 90% today, Pete, because they had an ultra-rapid antidepressant effect that was so much better than the placebo. Of course, placebo had no effect at all. This had nearly a 60% immediate effectiveness for this antidepressant. That's pretty cool because obviously when people are depressed, some really bad things can happen because your mind ain't right when you're in a deep depression. But if something can get you out of it pretty quick, like this one looks like it could be a pretty high demand product.
They average 75,000 shares a day, right? That sounds like a decent number, except for today where they're looking at 7 million shares were trading in the first 2 hours, John. I mean, there was some turnover in this son of a gun. It was up 80% plus or whatever. They don't have it's not a huge company, but I like what I see in terms of what they're doing from a cash burn perspective, what they've got in terms of cash against the debt and everything else. This thing is wired to do pretty well into the future, and they've got plenty of room when you consider that the free cash flow or cash burn actually is as small as it is. And I think that's something huge. They don't have a whole lot of in the pipeline. They've got maybe 4 stocks, or 6 stocks, 4 different types of treatments that they've got that they're working on trying to get out into the public. Everything seems to be basically in tier 2, let's call it A and B. They sort of split it up now, John, to some degree. So this one could be pretty damn interesting. To your point, I think we're seeing more and more of this on the mental health side, and that's something that clearly these guys are working directly on. They've got something that went up against the placebo, like you said. Everything seems to be going extremely well. That's why they had this major reaction. I just always like to warn people, you still got to go through phase 3. You still got to get it out there to the folks to approve it. So it isn't there yet, but there's a lot of reasons to be very, very upbeat about what the future looks like for this company.
Well, how about some upbeat news about some sports, Pete? I know we've got the biggest sporting event in the world coming our way. And no, it's not the World Cup. It is the Super Bowl. But are you going to start off with football, or are you going to start off with something else, Pete?
I think we start off with something else, and everybody can see it on that sports blitz there. But the reality is, John, one of the biggest trades, when you consider the people that are involved in the trade, one of the biggest we've probably seen in any sport, really. I mean, the Herschel Walker trade, I go back to that one, John, but that was basically Herschel to the Vikings, and the Vikings sending out like 5 or 6 starting players. They ruined everything from the franchise, sending all that down to Dallas, and it turned Dallas into a mega power right underneath when Jerry Jones was basically getting ready to take it and bring it to the next level, which he has done, or at least he did pretty early in that whole thing. This is a little bit different. I mean, when you look at this trade for Luka at Dallas, he's a top 5 guy, most likely in the NBA. I mean, everybody kind of talks about where everybody's ranked and all that. Did LeBron know anything about it? I got to tell you this, John. I get sort of tired about the superstars that we care what they think. And if the ownership, why did they care what I don't mind the idea of, hey, what do you think? What do you think of this quarterback, or what do you think of this? I get that talking to the players, but when it's all said and done, I think whether it's the general manager or the owner, they need to make the decisions that they think is the best decision to make the team better, right? I mean, that's the way I view it anyway. So they get Luka, he goes out to LA, and then you get Anthony Davis, and he's going out to Dallas. Now, I guess the big question becomes, who got the better end of the deal? Now, everybody is saying, well, Luka's young, he's this, he's that. The one issue that you do have to have with Luka, John, is this, and everybody's brought this up, but the injuries. And how many games this guy has missed. Now, he's a great player. He's the reason the Timberwolves didn't get to the next level last year when the Timberwolves were running and had a shot and they would have gone up against Boston. They didn't get the opportunity. Luka is that good. He's a heck of a player. He's missed 91 games in his, I think it's 5 or 6 year career, John. So that's something that I think is something concerned about by a lot of people. We also talk about Luka and the fact that he doesn't really show up in shape. He decides to show up and then work himself into basketball shape. It's like the old days in the NFL. Remember that, John? When the players would show up and they'd use the training camp to get in shape. They don't do that anymore anywhere that I'm aware of. And you know what? If they try to do that, you're going to get cut rather. And I see this whole trade. I think it's pretty interesting. I'm one of the few guys out there who thinks, you know what? Anthony Davis at 31, 32 years old, I think he's got time. He's had injuries too, though. So, I mean, that's going to be an issue. But for right now, the here and now, I actually think Dallas for this year might have actually gotten the better of them. Now, into the future, because of age and everything else, probably not. But LeBron's not going to play forever, so they needed some face out there, John, and I think that was part of this trade too. And shoot, this guy is one of the top guys in the NBA. He just can't stay healthy.
Yeah, and there's also only one basketball on the court at a time, Pete.
Yeah.
which, I'll be honest, with Michael Jordan, it made a difference. Was Michael an unselfish player? At times, absolutely. But was he allergic to leather, as they say? Yes. That ball touches his hands, it's going up. And the same thing with Luka, Pete. That guy will rain threes from anywhere, and I know LeBron used to be able to do that. I don't know how good he is at it anymore. But are there enough basketballs between those two guys, Pete? And not just basketballs in terms of winning games, but basketballs in terms of what if all of a sudden Luka is putting up, 10 points more than LeBron every game? How long does the king take that, Pete, before he's like, oh, hell with this, and starts talking to the other players about not giving Luka the ball so much? I mean, I think you're right. I think Dallas might have got the better end of the deal. But on the other hand, LeBron's going to be gone one of these days. Luka's young enough that he could carry the team for those years when LeBron is gone. But while they're both there, Pete, like I say, there ain't enough basketballs on that court.
They might be fighting over those basketballs. I think you're right. John, we'll hit more about the Super Bowl later in the week because it's going to be nonstop. And obviously, I don't know if you saw the Pro Bowl, but that you can't watch it. There is no Pro Bowl. Let's be honest.
No.
They put all these guys out there. They're playing video games. They're doing this. They're doing that. I mean, it really has gone the wrong way. That's another one where I think that they haven't done a great job up in the upper echelon of the C-suite of the NFL because this thing has really gone the wrong way. And Peyton Manning Productions and all that, John, they're the ones really putting this thing out there. And I'll tell you what, in the last 3 years, it has dropped basically 1 million viewers per year. Bing, bing, bing. I mean, so we'll see if they want to keep doing this whole thing, but I can't watch it. And nobody that I've talked to said, yeah, I watched it. I couldn't find one person, and I know a lot of guys in sports and everything else, in football and everything. Nobody's watched it. Nobody's interested, and it's terrible. So I figured we'd do this one, John. Pete Carroll and the Raiders could really be kind of interesting. This is a team that was 4-13 last year, right? Pete Carroll stepped away from the game or was pushed away, whatever the case up in Seattle. But in any case, he was missing for a year. Well, he's back with the Raiders. Do you know who he signed as offensive coordinator today, John? Pretty interesting. Chip Kelly.
From
now,
Ohio
Chip
State.
Kelly, they know each other pretty well, John, because there was a point in time where Pete was at USC. Well, Chip was up at Oregon, and they've been Philadelphia and this, and, so they've been around against each other quite a bit. Now he's got him as an offensive coordinator. I'll tell you what, after watching Ohio State and what they did with the quarterback and the rest of those great players that they had, Chip Kelly did call some pretty damn good plays, I think, for the offense, and he did it throughout the year. So that's kind of fun. They got a great tight end, John, who broke records as a rookie this year at the Raiders. They got a wide receiver in Jacoby Myers. They got a guy that they're eyeing up, according to my guys on the inside over there, that there's a guy out there that reminds Pete Carroll of DK Metcalf. And I think that's a pretty impressive guy to remind you of. He's 6'5", weighs about 220 pounds. He's a complete freak show athlete. His last name is McMillan. He's a wide receiver who set some records at Arizona this past year, John. That could be pretty cool, I think. If they do something like that with their pick in the first round, they've got a 6th-round pick or 6th pick in the draft. But what about this? Who if you were there, who would you suggest for quarterback? Because they don't have a quarterback. I know there's guys on the roster. They don't have a quarterback. So do you do this? Here's my 2 guys I'll throw out to you because you're probably not going to draft one. And I don't know that you're going to be able to draft the right guy at that position. Russell Wilson, back with Pete Carroll like he was at Seattle, or with Sam Darnold. And the reason I bring his name up, John, is how did he look this past year with the Vikings most of the year till those final 2 games, the last game of the year? I mean, the guy was talked about for MVP, definitely all-pro, had an unbelievable year, and he had a hell of a lot of talent around him, good tight ends, great wide receivers. Sounds a little bit like the Raiders to me. So do you go with Russell Wilson, or do you maybe take a shot on Sam Darnold and just say, we got some guys on defense, got a nice offensive line. We did some good drafting last year and previous years for that offensive line to get bigger and better. You just need a quarterback. That's what they're missing. Probably a running back too, but you could draft a running back, second, third round, something like that. What do you do about quarterback, Jon?
Well, the thing that works against Darnold, Pete, is that he's got the big contract coming. I
Yeah.
mean, wherever he goes, that's going to be $140 million ticket or more,
Yeah.
depending how many years. So, when you're in that rarefied 40 to $60 million number, just look at Cousins. I mean, he's down there in Atlanta and he crapped in the bed without the big wide receivers and the tight end and all the stuff like you said. So less of a risk, Russell. Less of a risk to, the franchise's money and its ability to sign other players. Russell Wilson, I think. Because obviously, freaking the Walmart, every time you buy something at Walmart, folks, you're putting money in Russell Wilson's pocket. Because that was the stupid trade that they made to get Russell Wilson in Denver. So I think Russell is a good guy. I think that was a bad situation that he made worse by, wanting all the special star treatment and everything else, Pete. If he decides to be a real human, like he seemed to be with the Steelers, because I don't think Tomlin plays that game at all.
No, he does not.
And I don't think Brady's going to play that game. Not that he's the GM, but I don't think Brady'd love to pat him on the back and tell him great job, but he ain't going to baby that guy and give him his own private locker room and all that stuff like Denver did. So I would say Russell Wilson more likely than Darnold because of the money you'd have to shell out to get Darnold, Pete.
I think you're probably right. I look at it as, it's a situation so much like the Vikings for Sam Darnold in this case, where they've got the talent. They've got a really talented guy calling the plays, and Chip Kelly now. And you've got Pete Carroll, who's a great defensive mind. So they've really put something together, I think. I think it's potential that these guys could maybe pull a Washington type move, Jon, where they go from the bottom and maybe at least get up there, not at the top, but somewhere closer to the top. I mean, I think if they do the right things to get that franchise together, the Raiders could be pretty damn interesting. But a lot of that does hinge around who do they grab as a quarterback, and I guess we'll find out about that one.
Sure. Well, folks, remember, as always, that QR code right down there under my finger, let's see, right there, that QR code will get you signed up for our March 22nd event in Vegas. It'll give you all the details. Technically, it won't sign you up at all. You have to do that, just like you have to pull the trigger on your trades. But if you'd like some trades like the VIX trade we had talked about today, like the Ford trade we talked about today, if you want to know how to do that and how we do it on a day in, day out basis, soon 24 hours a day, well, come on out to Las Vegas, Nevada, MGM Grand, March 22nd, RebelCon 2025, March 22nd. It's going to be fabulous. We got Grant Cardone. We've got Bryn Talkington, Liz Clayman, Charlie Gasparino. So many stars are going to be there, folks. It's going to be a great time. It's a great way to up your trading game. So check it out. And meanwhile, Pete and I say goodbye until tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern Time.